Selaco absolutely exploding onto the scene with an uppercut to the nutsack of many gamers who had never experienced the boomer shooter genre. Holy shit, my hair got disheveled flailing around during the theatrics of the intro, but goddamn, it was worth it.
Who wants to see me do a big ass stunt?
Selaco is hot sticky fire to the point where I'm going to do a dedicated review for that game, as it is the best retro shooter that I've played. I was going to say in a long while, but probably ever. Since it's built on the OG Doom engine, it really brought me back to, well, my childhood playing boomer shooters. In my childhood, I had access to the boomer shooters, which would technically make me a boomer, but I'm not though. So first of all, this isn't going to be an in-depth review of Selaco. That's coming in a couple of days, but Selaco is what definitely inspired this video to be made, as it is built on a modified GZ Doom engine, which is definitely apparent that that's the core bones or foundation. However, there are game mechanics from so many other popular games or franchises from the time period, such as Duke 'Em Nukem, Half-Life, Quake, a little bit of everything. And it's all implemented incredibly well. Generally, when you have a mashup of previous genres or games and you throw them into a big melting pot, it can either taste like a big pile of shit, for lack of a better word, feces, or it can be a delicious concoction. And in this case, it goes down smooth, which luckily it is only $22 on Steam currently, as this game is in early access and it is supposed to be the first of 3 chapters or installments. It is a single-player first-person shooter developed and published by Altered Orbit Studios, and this game started early access May 31st, although it plays so much smoother than virtually any early access game I've played. You might hear me call it Selaco. Looking up the English pronunciation over here, that was the first thing I did. Selaco. Genuinely as minimally as important as how to pronounce Pokemon Arceus or Arceus. Who cares? The game was subpar regardless, just like Selaco is a fucking humdinger, is your brother a singer, regardless of how you want to pronounce it. So first of all, what the heck is a boomer shooter? A shooter is a game where you're shooting people in the suckhole, and boomers are those old people that always yell at me for popping wheelies on my electric scooter on the sidewalk. Quite simply, these are extremely fast-paced, relatively small arena shooters that usually have 1 or 2 unique game mechanics. And before they were called boomer shooters, they were just the first shooters ever, such as Doom and Quake, the foundation, the bones that started it all. They really did crawl so Halo could walk a little bit faster on the Xbox and make shooters what they are today. But something to note, other than Star Wars Dark Forces, there usually wasn't any vertical aiming. It was just horizontal, extremely fast sprinting, so movement was key, paramount. And the modern boomer shooters are definitely meant to reflect graphically that retro style, going for 2D sprites or cell shading, something that might not look like the graphic realism of COD. Furthermore, boomer shooters generally focus on shredding waves of enemies and completing levels as quickly as possible, so very popular in the speedrunning community. Also, a lot of boomer shooters are notorious for being extremely difficult. Yet another side point, a lot of boomer shooters are meant to be bite-sized snackables where you can just pick them up and you don't have to worry about keeping up with a story or anything like that. Kind of like a roguelike, where you're really just focusing on the gameplay mechanics more so than a story or collecting stuff in your inventory or anything like that. And pretty much all of these boomer shooters are based on the core foundation of Doom, Quake, and Wolfenstein, but now have varied gameplay mechanics, but do still stick very closely to that core gameplay that I just explained earlier, more focused on fast-paced, shredding through waves of enemies, often very difficult, short levels you're trying to get through as quick as possible. So what are some killer boomer shooters that you can play right now, other than Selaco? Well, first of all, you got Ultra Kill, which is rated the highest boomer shooter on Steam, or at least it was for quite some time, published by New Blood Interactive, early access since 2020, and this is a super fast-paced, ultra-violent, old-school shooter developed by Hakita Patala and published by New Blood Interactive. You play as V1, a combat machine fueled by blood, who's ventured into the depths of hell after the extinction of humanity. Hell abounds with demons and tormented souls, sources of blood that you must shred to bits in order to refuel yourself and survive. Blood is fuel, something to keep note of. Keep yourself topped off, sucker. And if you don't want to spend any caps, there is a free demo on Steam so you can wet your beak, see if it tastes good to you. Then you got Ion Fury, which came out in 2019. It's a cyberpunk style first-person shooter, but still definitely a boomer shooter, published by 3D Realms. It's a prequel to that 2016 game Bombshell. The nitty-gritty is you play as Shelly Bombshell Harrison, a bomb disposal expert tasked with fighting through a dystopian city of Neo DC. As for the engine, it's built on eDuke 32.
Let's dance.
Then you got Proteus, which started as one of those crowd-funded Kickstarter campaigns. I just talked about my opinion on those recently during a product review that was a Kickstarter campaign. Nothing against them, but you've got to proceed with a little bit of caution, as you should if you're going to be playing Proteus. It's a first-person shooter developed by Bounding Box Software, published by Humble Games, and the game's not very humble because you run around blasting faces off. What's interesting about Proteus is that it uses a modern game engine to extend the experience and give you that modern fidelity that you're used to. Fidelity is a word that gets thrown around. It means like fucking nothing, but anyway, I used it and it meant something to me. But it totally looks like a 1990s shooter, but it's built on a modern engine. It has interactive levels, a pretty good gore system, although it doesn't have the destructible environments like Selaco where you can just blow apart walls and stuff. But you have a dynamic soundtrack that gets a little bit more spicy depending on how many shells you're slinging. And what's cool is you can actually toggle between modern visuals or apply shaders to give the game that old school pixelated look, simulating resolutions down to as low as 216p, which is like the screen of a Tamagotchi pet. Warhammer 40k has Bolt Gun, which is a boomer shooter, and if you're a fan of Warhammer and all the lore of that world, that alone, you should just check this game out.
The Ultramarines!
The medieval kind of drew me in from the visuals. Colors were very visually pleasing to me. This game is unlike others because it has a dark fantasy theme, and this game has frequently been called a spiritual successor to the 1994 Heretic and 1995 Hexen, which is not a bad thing. There's also a version planned for Switch. The Switch would be a perfect console to play boomer shooters because they're not very heavy or resource intensive usually because they're built on retro engines, except for the one we mentioned a second ago that's on a modern engine. It ain't gonna have your Steam Deck sweating from the bolts or anything like that. There's a lot of aspects from Unreal, Doom, Heretic, Hexen, and Quake into Medieval, and it features complex non-linear progression, often requiring the player to seek out keys to unlock doors, so a little bit of puzzling, not just going around melting enemies like a stick of butter. Gotta use your brain sometimes as well. Last but not least, you've got Turbo Overkill, the name alone. It is another cyberpunk-style shooter game developed by Trigger Happy Interactive and published by Apogee Entertainment. It was released on Steam in April of 22, and you're Johnny Silverhand, basically. No, you're more machine than he is. You're half man, half metal. This game does have some stunning visuals and has some pretty slick weapons like augmented hidden arm rockets and a chainsaw that pops out of your leg. There is a story to this game, as there is with pretty much all of these boomer shooters that I mentioned, although that's not really the primary focus, as these focus more heavily on the fast-paced gameplay. But what you'll actually be doing is racing through 24 stages packed with secrets, bonus arenas, and white-knuckle combat puzzles. So again, gotta use your brain as well as your trigger finger, and you're gonna find combat challenging collectibles to unlock punishing modifiers. So a little bit of in-game replayability there, that once you've already shredded through all the base levels, you can apply modifiers to change up the way enemies are gonna behave, such as triple monster speed, which makes them all on crystal meth, and insta-kill.
We're entering paradise airspace.
So I know I just gave you 6 plus Selaco, and there are literally dozens of really good boomer shooters that are worth a recommendation. However, I don't even know if this video is going to perform very well. 3 people might view it. I don't know. I might have to shut down the channel because this video doesn't do well. That's not happening. But I don't really know if there's a lot of interest from my audience or the YouTube platform for boomer shooters. But if there is, I would be more than willing. In fact, like Chick-fil-A, it would be my pleasure to not fuck up your order and to give you a second part of this video with several more boomer shooters that you can check out. Drop in the comment section below what boomer shooters you like to play and on what platform. Probably PC, as that is the most popular for boomer shooters because they're really cheap on Steam usually, and you don't need a hardcore PC to run them. Your old family PC that's bogged down with porn on the hard drive, not a problem. It'll run it. That made no sense. Nobody has a family PC anymore. But then again, you could say that nobody's playing boomer shooters, and that would be a goddamn lie.
Lie detector test determined that was a lie.
I'll see you Stallions and Stallionettes tomorrow. Peace. If you enjoyed the video, liking it helps it to get seen by more gamers, so this information will reach and assist them as well. Much like the back of the TV, I've got plugs for all of my socials down there in the description below. And your wallet will greatly thank you if you check the description, because there are exclusive discounts on a ton of products, including controllers, KontrolFreeks, keyboards, mouse pads, clothes, and energy drinks. And keep in mind that you, the viewer, keep this channel running. The more stallions and stallionettes trotting around the stable, the better, so mollywop that subscribe button like it owes you money, and we'll have the same amount of fun tomorrow.